Now, got a very interesting Patreon question here from Alfred, and it's about the integration of foreign industry into the German war efforts in World War II. He notes, what about the impact of the industry in the conquered countries? How were they integrated? What were the biggest problems? How efficient could they be run? Now, this is a huge and very complicated topic. Now, very important here for all aspiring dictators and future invaders or liberators, however you see yourself. Pause this video, get your notebook, because there will be some more very important general details about resources and everything you should pay attention to. Okay, so you ready? Have your notebook ready? Okay. Now, the first thing, which is probably quite obvious to some, you can't just grab industry and resources from other countries. Now, there are studies done by the Germans before the Second World War, and they looked at the all resources of Europe, and if it was self-sufficient, and I think I had some like 30 values, and you can see, okay, for some stuff it's self-sufficient, for some it's barely self-sufficient, and some there's just a major lack, even if you have the whole Europe together. And the main aspect is Europe was, in many aspects, reliant on imports. So this is but only one part of the story. The other is, of course, logistics. And there's a lot of friction going on.
So what do I mean with friction? Let's assume you have 5 different areas where you extract a certain resource. And then you have like 3 areas where you use it. This means you need to transport it, which costs fuel, usually coal. Additionally, you need the proper infrastructure, rolling stock, vehicles, personnel, and much more. Even in peacetime, this can be quite a problem, as you might have experienced yourself, for instance when trains are being late. Now add on top of this that there's war, which means sabotage, bombing attacks, security issues, prioritization of military transport, and much more.
There's the other aspect. Economies, industries of countries are very delicate systems. They're like a Swiss watch. You can't just throw in a sand corn or something and hope it just works out fine. So because for transport you need coal, you need oil, you need rolling stock and vehicles. If you take something out, there's quite a problem. So for instance, you take away the trucks. The milk the farmers produced, which you need the food as well, because food is also a very important resource. In the rural areas, who is getting the milk now? Because the trucks are not there or they don't have fuel, so the milk gets bad. Another aspect is, for instance, for electricity, for your factories, you need coal, because most electricity was provided, for instance, in certain areas with coal. The next is administration. So what are you gonna do? You just send a bunch of your bureaucrats over? Okay, first off, they need proper education. They need the proper administrative education. But they also need to speak the language. You also need to provide them with security. So you need highly qualified personnel, and you're also fighting a war, and the Wehrmacht is also quite recruiting indiscriminately. So where do you get your excellent bureaucrats off? Because do you want to have the general staff, or do you want to have them sitting in behind a desk somewhere in France? You also, and there's a complication. You also need qualified manpower for exploiting certain industries or certain countries. Now the same is with the proper system for administration. You use the existing system and adapt it to yours, or what do you do? Who is going to doing the administration? Is it the military administration, or do you use the civilian administration? Do you create new areas? For instance, new regions. I think Germany, the northern France and Belgium was one region for them, for instance. Or do you use the existing ones? And also one general main question is, you gonna milk the cow or you gonna butcher it? Do you want the meat now and more, or do you want to milk over the long run? And you have to ask this yourself a lot of times in a lot of different areas. Now these are the general questions. Now also very important here, Austria and Czechoslovakia are not included here in this whole issue because, well, there are several reasons for this. These happened pre-war, so the Germans had quite a lot of bureaucrats actually still available. Additionally, in Austria there was no language barrier. And well, the collaboration or cooperation was extremely high. Basically, I think there was not very much resistance at this point going on. And for Czechoslovakia, to a certain degree, there was a similar issue because, I mean, it was different from resistance and some other stuff, but Czechoslovakia, this part where most was built, was formerly the industrial center of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So you had already more or less a similar system existing. I don't know how much was similar or exact, but it was not completely different. Now let's look at German occupation administration. So generally there was the main problem, there were different agendas and strategy. So there was generally some indecision, and for instance for the Eastern territories there was like, do we collaborate or do we just exploit? There were different people who wanted different stuff. And this all was reflected by the administration because the administration was not at all unified. Now, what does this mean, not unified administration? So basically you had many different institutions and sometimes they had conflicting orders, conflicting goals. And when the results were not up to scratch, well, Hitler just appointed a new guy or several new guys, give them some warrants and ignored existing structures. Basically in the book it's called usually the anarchy of warrants, the Anarchie der Vollmachten, because it was mostly a chaos. Now it's not known if Hitler did this intentionally to prevent a unity, and because he did this also in domestic politics, so that the different guys basically had their power struggles against each other, that he had his back basically protected. And so here it could be the same, or it could be out of convenience because it just didn't care. For instance, it was known that Hitler didn't want to collaborate too much because this would have required him to make certain, basically assurances and then fulfill them in the long run. Or it was, I don't want to care about this. Now, against the whole administration chaos, Speer, the armaments minister, later basically plunged through a bit to the chaos and created way more effective structures to a certain degree, but still it was a bit late. Another aspect was that there was not a lot of political incentives to maximize the utilization of the occupied industries and territories. So again, Hitler was against collaboration. And there are some original remarks in the documents that the Germans said about themselves: we rule with the fist, not with the brains. And other remarks I think was like, I think they stated in verbatim, the Germans are not ready to rule yet because how they treat most people, which I think was written by an army commander or army governor or something. It was like pretty like straightforward, so okay, we can do this. Now, let's look at a specific case. Let's look at France. Because, first off, France was the largest contributor and it was occupied quite long as well. So, let's look at 1943 to have some numbers. So, here on the whole total production, France produced around 11.9% of automobiles. And for instance, the best in ship production was the Netherlands with 14%. Of course, ship production was already rather limited at this point, but still, as you can see, there were some quite important contributions. Now, in general, the French economy suffered quite extremely. All the occupied territories were at best stagnant, so no improvement, but usually went down. This is in stark contrast if you look at the economies of the United Kingdom and Germany as well. They rose. And of course, the United States just skyrocketed. So now here's the issue. Why? One major problem was France was dependent on imports. For instance, coal. Of course, coal in theory, there was enough coal in whole of Europe. Yet you need also coal to ship. Use it for your ships. You have also not even on the oceans, but you also have ships on the rivers. And of course, for your trains. Then you also need coal for your factories. And you also need coal for heating civilian housing and everything. And for instance, the French had enough bauxite for aluminium. But for that you need electricity. And they know that, okay, if we should build aircraft, we need at least 100,000 tons of coal each month. And the Germans could promise 4. So 1/30 of it. So on paper, enough coal was there, but as you can see, if you look at the real situation, the economics, the logistics, it didn't really add up. And another issue was that France was basically demilitarized because they only got about 8% of the petrol they got pre-war. And this led to the milk getting bad at the dairy farms, at the French dairy farms, because nobody could collect it, for instance. Then, of course, there was a lot of looting going on. I mean, looting more like organized looting. So like, okay, we take these resources and everything. And in some instances, this like took out some resources and they realized, oh, actually we need to produce something. Now we need to put them back. But then you always have the timing issue. You put them back at the right time, or is it already too late and everything. Now on the whole efficiency issue, if you look at it, we actually have quite some interesting numbers for the aircraft industry, which are quite extreme, but Adam Tooze notes they are extreme, but not so uncommon. So for 1941, the French produced 78 aircraft for the Germans. In contrast, the USA sent 5,012 to the United Kingdom. So 78 versus 5,000. For 1942, France already produced about 10 times as much, 743. Now in 1942, the United States sent very few aircraft actually because they kept most for them, but they still sent 7,775. So still more than 10 times what France produced, the United States could give away. In total, France produced 2,517 aircraft and the Netherlands 947 aircraft. As you can see, compared to the other numbers, so basically in 1941, when the United States only sent 5,000 aircraft, France in the whole war contributed about the half of it. And I assume that the quality and also the type of aircraft probably from the United States was likely better than what Germany got out of France. And the Germans looked at this and they realized it takes 4 times the time to produce an aircraft in France than in Germany. This was also one reason why, to a certain degree, they pulled in a lot of slave labor and foreign workers into Germany at some point, because they realized, okay, we have other measures here to get more out of every work hour. Now, it's very important to see this everything in context and look at the whole picture here. Because basically what you have is a kind of a chain reaction or death spiral. Now, for instance, there was a lack of food. Now you would ask why? Well, there were several reasons for this. First off, there was a lack of fertilizer because, well, the chemical industry was more occupied with producing ammunition than with producing fertilizer. Then you have a lack of manpower because you have men recruited in the army, also in the administration and everything. Then you have a lack of horses because you pulled them out for your infantry divisions or for your other divisions and for your supply units and everything. So you have a lack of transportation in the country. Then you have a lack of animal feed because a lot of that was imported actually, for instance from Argentina. So your farms put out less because your animals are not well fed enough. You have not enough horses to transport everything or to use on your farms. You have a lack of manpower, there's not enough labor, and you have not enough fertilizer. As you can see, the problem is you have not just one factor that decreases the output of your farm and delivery, you have several. Then you have a lack of food. What happens now? The worker output decreases even more because for hard labor you need quite a lot of calories. For instance, in the mines especially, this was a problem. And when you have a lack of, when you have a problem with your miners' output, you have even more lack of coal or iron ore. And if you have a lack of coal, you have a lack of electricity and a lack of transport, or you have to cut down in one of these areas. As you can see, if you have an industry or an economy and you put out some of the blocks, it can very fast break down due to some changes that at first look minor issues or minor points. Oh yeah, let's take away some trucks because we need them in our infantry divisions or in our panzer divisions, and we need a few horses, and yeah, what should happen? And then it was suddenly, okay, the whole area transportation system breaks down or is not sufficient. So in short, to answer your questions about the impact, well, the impact was very limited. There are many aspects they did quite, in other aspects they put out more from resources and everything, but in overall, if you compare it, especially with the contributions of the United States or something, it was very limited. Now, how integrated? Well, you could say badly. And if you're more interested in the economic side, for instance, quite often the Germans tried to buy the industry to a certain degree, but to a fixed price. And they had ridiculous conversion ratios from the Reichsmark to the occupied countries, and they had occupation taxes and everything. So it was quite dubious financing, and in some cases they just confiscated property. For instance, state property was usually just confiscated, and yeah. So dubious financing and everything around there. If you want to know more about this, Adam Tooze Invasion of Destruction explains this quite well. Then what were the biggest problems? Well, basically everything. I didn't see anything that was not a problem with everything. As you can see, that the whole system was too complicated, and the bureaucracy was not good. There were not enough people to do it. The whole system was designed badly, not unified, and yeah, quite clumsy done as well. So it's a combination of. I didn't see anything what was written. Okay, this actually functioned very well, or this was very well thought out. Basically, the only thing that to a certain degree probably worked was when Speer was trying to get something going. And how efficient was it? I don't think efficient is the proper word here to use. So big thank you here, Alfred, for the question. I hope you liked the answer. Also, big thank you here to Andrew, who helped me out and pointed me in the right direction with Tooze, where to start and look up into this and everything. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.